Welcome to the ISO Show, dispelling myths and sharing tips for success to improve your business with ISO standards, with your host, Mel Blackmore.
Hello and welcome to the ISO Show. Well, at the beginning of this year at Blackmores, we started looking at our strategy and including marketing strategy. And part of that was looking at our customer journey. So really interesting journey that we went on ourselves to be able to understand that. But I was fortunate enough to be introduced to an amazing guy called Jürgen Strauss, who is a very popular podcaster. He's got an awesome podcast, InnovaBiz, which I've been on recently. So that's definitely worth a listen to if you want to find out a little bit more about me. 'Cause normally you hear me interviewing other people on the podcast, but that's where Jürgen flipped the coin on me. But he's also a leading marketing strategist as well. Now you might be thinking, how does this fit with ISO standards? Well, all businesses need customers and they need to understand ideally who their perfect client would be, okay? Because then it makes running a business a joy, and also you can clearly identify what your ideal client's needs are if you can get that granular in determining those specific requirements. And as we know with ISO 9001, we need to understand what the client's requirements are and meet those requirements. So I'm delighted to be joined by Jürgen today, who's going to share with us insights into understanding who your ideal client is, the best way to identify them, helping to build a relationship with those clients, which he'll be introducing his empathy map, which I'm keen to hear all about, and understanding, why mapping out your customer journey is so important and how this could potentially transform your business. So without further ado, I'd like to welcome Jürgen. Hi, Jürgen.
Hi, Mel, and thanks for having me on the ISO Show. It's a privilege to be here and to speak with you again.
Brilliant. So before we begin, could you be able to share with our ISO Show listeners a bit about your background and where this all began?
Sure. Well, I guess it all began many years ago when I started my corporate journey, and I ended up spending 27 years in the corporate world, going through various roles as you do over that time span, built a career through the technical and research and departments because my background is in science, and then went on to things like marketing, things like business management, things like supply chain. And during that time also was involved in one of the very early ISO 9001 implementations at the large global company I was working for. And one of the interesting stories there, and I think we may have talked about this on the InnovaBuzz podcast when you were on, was where we had these challenges with the research people who decided that having processes in place that fit within the ISO 9001 standards was going to hamper their creativity and hamper their productivity. And yet it was actually the opposite was true once they understood that really it all began with understanding your customer and understanding what the customer needs were that you had the ability to solve, and working with customers and having a process in place, mapping all the journey and all the touch points, that was really the way to improve the business, to improve the efficiency and really be more productive. So that was a big lesson for me in my corporate career through my involvement in ISO many years ago. Back in 2007, I started my small business InnovaBiz, and we focused on the marketing and building marketing processes and working on that kind of understanding, bringing those principles from ISO and just having documented systems for everything that happened in the business and that people did in the business. And over time, we started our InnovaBuzz podcast, and that's since developed into what I call a flywheel. We really can't stop or slow that down. And that flywheel is also based on the whole principle of our marketing strategy or our marketing systems, that's understanding who the customers are, in this case, understanding particularly who the audience is that we want to reach, and then who the guests are that we can bring on to serve that audience as well.
So you have recorded a lot of podcasts. You're putting me to shame. What number are you up to at the moment, Jürgen?
That's right. I think we recorded episode 506 or somewhere thereabouts last week. We've got 480 something published, and we've got some special group conversations going for episode 500 to celebrate the 500th episode. So that's pretty exciting, because I'd never done a group conversation as a podcast before, and that they actually turned out really spectacularly well, and people really enjoyed it as well. So we might start to do that on a more regular basis, maybe once a month, have a group podcast with, say, 6 or so guests on.
Yeah, I look forward to listening to that. And I know that where we're recording this, obviously I'm in Letchworth Garden City and you're in Australia. Were your guests from Australia as well, or were they, again, global?
There was only one guest from Australia. The rest were all US, Canada, the UK. We had a couple from the UK on one of the sessions to fit in with the different time zones. Yeah, I think that was pretty much it, mainly North America and the UK.
Yeah, it's fantastic. I think, the impact that podcasts can have in reaching a global audience, it's amazing. I mean, when I first started the ISO show a couple of years ago, we never anticipated that, we would have people listening in 35 different countries across the globe. Yeah, it's great to be able to get your message out there, isn't it? To have some type of positive impact, I think, on our listeners' businesses and lives.
Yeah, it's also wonderful to connect with guests like you from all around the world, experts in their field, that often that's been very difficult in the past, but now with podcasting and the online meetings that everybody's embracing so much, it gives us those opportunities as well. Yeah.
Do you find that you attract your potential ideal clients through the podcast, Jürgen?
Yes, we do. We do that. My whole mapping of the customer journey is really, the first step is to understand who the dream customer is. I like to call it the dream customer. They're the ones that pay on time, that you absolutely enjoy working with. In fact, you'd probably work with them for free if that was what was needed. But of course, being a dream customer, they actually pay you what you're worth and pay on time and everything. But they're a pleasure to work with. They get results from the service that you provide them, and they tell other people about you. So that's really the dream customer. And if you align the audience that you reach on a podcast with those dream customers, they're in the audience, then as you build a relationship with those people, as you have conversations with those people going down that customer journey, some of them decide that what you have is what they need, and they like you and trust you because of the conversations and the relationship that's been built. And so they turn into customers. They decide to become customers.
Yeah, I think, for some organisations that are looking to scale up and grow their business, they might be thinking, well, any business is good, so all clients are an ideal client. But that's not necessarily the case, is it? Why would you say it's important to have an ideal client clearly defined for your business?
Well, very much. I mean, I agree with you that, and I've made this mistake in the past. I've taken clients on board because I needed extra cash flow. I needed the money, and I thought, yes, I can do what that person needs. But we weren't a good match. And when you're not a good match, the client ends up being unhappy. You end up being unhappy. Often it builds resentment. And so it's just an unpleasant experience all around. So it's best to, even if it means foregoing that income, it's best to actually tell that person honestly, I don't think we're a good match. The best thing you can do to help that person is to say, here's a couple of other suggestions of people that would be a good match, that are experts in exactly what you need and that I think will work well with you. Send them that way. And that leaves the opportunity then to work with other clients that are the dream client. And if you have done the work to really understand who they are, and more than just the psychographics and the demographics, but getting deep into empathizing with them and understanding what drives them, what motivates them, what values they have. And then you'll actually recognize people when you meet them, when you have conversations with them, and you'll know, hey, that's a dream customer that fits with my values, my philosophy, my approach, and also they need what I have. I can actually make a difference in their life, in their business, and that opens up that opportunity. I had a really interesting experience that highlighted this for me very early on when I developed this process for going through that whole exercise, and I did one for a new initiative that we were starting at the time. And a little while after we'd done the exercise, I was in a room having a conversation with somebody, and behind me, somebody else was having a conversation. Two other people were having a conversation, and one of them outlined somebody that had a particular need and was doing something. And just with 3 sentences, I kind of overheard that and thought, that's my dream customer for this particular new initiative we started. And it enabled me to go up and talk to that person then and say, tell me more about that, and ask a whole bunch of questions. And I said, hey, and I think it was their brother or something they were talking about. I said, would your brother be interested in having a conversation? Because I think maybe I could help with some of that. And it actually led on to business there. So it highlighted for me that this is a really powerful exercise that really gets you seeing and recognizing who those people are that match that whole dream customer profile that we've put together.
Yeah, so you obviously overheard somebody and that you thought, yeah, that something clicked. They were your ideal client. But what would you recommend is the best way for people to be able to identify who their ideal client is and also what their needs are?
Yeah, well, we often start with kind of taking a step back before that even, and going introspective and looking at what are my dreams and my aspirations, or what are our dreams and our aspirations as a business, and then what do we actually do, and how do we make a difference, and how do we deliver that? So we do that in a way that we then condense that into a really tight snapshot of what I call the lighthouse, which is the shining light or the consistent message. And it's really comes down to why we do what we do, what that is in a very high level statement, so that we can talk about those things to people. It's almost like an elevator pitch, but much more powerful. And then the second step then is to understand who is the customer for that particular thing. So what we do is we go through a whole lot of questions around obviously some of the demographics, but then also psychographics. What's their behavior? What are their needs specifically? Where are they likely to be found in terms of conversations that they have? What networks, what online media do they have conversations in? And that gives us a lot of information about our dream customer. And we like to do the exercise from the point of view of, think of someone that you perhaps currently work with who you really love working with, and do this exercise with them in mind. That way it makes it much more concrete. Also, if there are questions that we have in our list where you say, oh, I don't know, you can go talk to that person or those people, that business. We then take that and go beyond that. And you mentioned empathy map before. Now, it's not my empathy map. This was a tool developed by Dave Gray from a company called Explain. And we've taken that and used it in a way that helps us really understand a lot of the deeper values and aspirations of that dream client. So we look at the empathy map, breaks things down into what do people see, what do they hear, what do they think and feel, and what do they say and do. And so we consider a lot of things under those categories. And For example, one of my dream clients are trainers or business coaches that do workshops. So one of the things I say, they see a room full of people engaged and active. They hear a lot of noise, they hear applause, they hear people talking and interacting. They think that they have a lot of value to bring to those people. They also think that they're not good at marketing. And so they don't reach those people that they could help through their workshops. They also think that they're not really good in the online space and everything has to happen in physical proximity in live workshops. So you can see how that can be a problem in today's environment. So there's some of the things. And then the say and do is the behavior. So what behavior do we observe that they do? What do we hear them say? What can we imagine them saying? This gives us a lot of language as well, where we can use that language in our marketing content, and we can speak to them in a language that they understand, they hear and resonate with. And then we take that picture and we say, okay, what's their state right now? We call that kind of the before state. So that's what are the needs, what are the issues, what are the problems that they're facing right now that we can help with, and what's the transformation? What's their state going to be after we've worked with them? What's the result we're going to deliver? And then we kind of put that together and contrast it. And so one of the things I wrote recently was around water. So if I've got a product, water, and I'm selling water, my dream customer doesn't want water. They want their thirst quenched. So you need to get to that level of granularity and say, whilst I've got water's just the vehicle to quench their thirst. And in fact, there might be a whole lot of other vehicles or bridges that takes them from thirsty to no longer thirsty. And they might even want to know not just how can I quench this thirst right now, they might also want to know how can I stop from being thirsty ever again. So they're the kind of things we consider in that their state before and their state afterwards. And then once we have that whole picture, and I like to get people to actually draw pictures on this. So I get them on big whiteboard or big flip charts and ask them to draw, and then ask them to tell me the whole story around that. And often when that happens, there's a whole story and a whole background that evolves, and there's things that are highlighted that show up gaps in our understanding, and also incongruencies. For example, somebody might think that they're really good at something, but their behavior says that they actually avoid doing that. So there's an incongruency there. So what does that mean? Are they overestimating how good they are at it, or are they procrastinating for some other reason?
I was going to say, yeah, you're definitely kind of getting really under the skin of an individual and a business's needs and aspirations, but what's actually driving that? Fascinating. So is the end result then the empathy map then, Jürgen? Is this ultimately what we're mapping out?
Yeah, the empathy map really is a tool. The end result is really just the understanding and the story that comes out of that, and the ability to discuss that internally with teammates or with partners that we're working with to provide whatever service to the customer. For example, we did a major proposal, and I did this as a joint venture with two other businesses for a large corporation to do some training programs. And when we presented the proposal, during our preparation, the three partners working on this, we did this empathy map exercise, and then we put together the proposal based on what we'd learned from that exercise. And when we presented the proposal to the CEO of the company and his director of human resources, the comment afterwards was, "That was an amazing presentation. It's as if you were reading my mind." That was what he said after the meeting. So and to me, that encapsulates where you need to get to with doing this empathy mapping exercise really well. If you can get that response from a potential customer, then you know you've got your message really congruent with what their expectations are.
Yeah, and I guess that would lead to stronger relationships without a shadow of a doubt from the get-go, where if you're working in kind of a business-to-business environment, it does take a while to establish those relationships and develop and nurture those relationships. But that very quickly really helps you to understand what your prospects, if it's not a client yet, but what your prospects' needs are in order to be able to provide the best possible solution to meet their needs. And if the service that you provide isn't suitable for them, then that's quite quickly identified at that stage then, isn't it, rather than further down the line.
That's right.
I mean, it's interesting because as you were talking, I was thinking about our business, and obviously we're in the business of implementing ISO standards and maintaining and supporting clients with those. But a while ago, we wanted to understand our why. So yes, we do what we do. And quite often businesses come to us because they need to achieve certification to an ISO standard. And a number of years ago, we would have accepted any company that wanted to do that because we knew that we could help them. But what we've identified is, in terms of our why we do what we do, we want to create a positive impact. We want to be able to make a difference and help to transform businesses, not just provide information, but help them to transform their businesses to be more successful. And we have found that our ideal client is a company who has a similar mindset, that they want to improve their business. They want to create a positive impact. They don't just want to get the badge. So we are actually, as a result of going through that exercise and understanding our why and creating a positive impact and systems for success, it means that we're a better match for certain types of companies, but not others. But you do need to be quite brave to turn business away if you find that it's just not suitable. You're not a good fit. What would you say is the best way to be able to, because you might have a company and they want to work with you, what would you say is the easiest way of rejecting them?
Yeah, I've done this a few times, and to me the best way is just to be completely honest. And the ideal client exercise actually gives you some information where you could have that conversation with this person or with this company and say, look, really we work with these people, and these are some of the characteristics that we're looking for, and they're the people we work best with, and they're the people we can help best, and you don't fit in that category. That's not good or bad. There's no judgment on that. It's simply, we don't believe we're the best fit for you. And if you turn it around and say, look, we don't believe we would be doing you a service to work with you because we don't believe we're the best fit. If you can then point them to somebody else who might be a better fit, then at least you've helped them somewhat. Now that of course means you have to really know who else is out there doing similar things to you, but serve a slightly different market. So that kind of a more difficult thing perhaps in the area you work with, where there's not hundreds of ISO consultants out there.
Yeah, definitely. So looking at the empathy map, that's really the beginning of the customer journey. But once they are a client, I mean, why is it important to identify what the customer journey is and how that relates to marketing? Why is it important from a marketing perspective?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And we like to say that customer journeys are very complex things. They're not linear. So, and the customer journey starts at the point of understanding ourselves first, that we've talked about, and then understanding our dream customer. But then we somehow cross paths with somebody who's outside our world. They're not yet a customer, they're not yet what you would qualify as a lead, they're just somebody you've met somewhere. And typically if you meet somebody somewhere, you have a conversation with them. And that conversation can lead to a whole range of different things. I mean, 80% of the conversations probably you part ways and you never speak again because there's not enough you have in common. The other conversations that lead on to a second conversation, for example, that's kind of a step in the customer journey then. And some of those conversations then could just lead on to ongoing conversations because we're interested in the other person's work, they're interested in our work, but we're not going to do business with one another. Some of those conversations might lead to referring business to one another because we're in different fields, but we can see people that have need for the services that we provide. Some of the conversations might lead to doing work together as JV partners or something like that. And some of those conversations can lead to them doing business with us or us doing business with them, so they become a supplier to us. So there's lots of different ways the customer journey could take. And what we look at in all of that is, first of all, it starts with a conversation and it starts with some curiosity about getting to know the other person. And if we get to know them to the point of, oh, that person fits my dream customer profile, then of course the conversations go down that path towards them perhaps becoming a customer if they're on the same wavelength. And all of the time we're looking at what are all the different touch points. So each conversation is a touch point. When we first meet is a touch point. Every conversation, every experience is a touch point. And if we can, what we aspire to is to provide an exceptional experience at every touch point. And if we can do that, and then we know that we have the expertise to solve a problem that that customer has, they like us and trust us, and they want what we have to offer, then that's likely to lead to them becoming a customer and us working with them. And also we look at the customer journey beyond that. So if they start working with us as a customer, we provide the results. So let's say they're your customer and they're looking to implement one of the ISO standards. You work with them, you get them to the point where they have everything in place, they get the certification. That's not the end of the journey. The journey keeps going in our minds, where we continue those relationships, we continue to explore, because we've got a vested interest in them being successful. So we continue to explore where else are there things in your business that you need help with, and where can we fit with those needs. And that doesn't mean to say that you have to help them do something else that's not related to your skill set. You could, though, connect them with other people that have those skill sets and keep them in your network. You can introduce them to people. You can grow your network by bringing in other skills into that network and introduce people across that network. And then, of course, by doing that, it's highly likely that customers who've had that exceptional experience with you throughout their journey and are now inside your network and meeting other valuable people in that network that are helping them in other ways, that they're bringing people back into the network that are likely to become your customer in the future.
So would you say that this could potentially help to transform an organisation if they are looking to scale up, and also looking at how they operate as a business as well, as far as systems and processes are concerned?
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, all of this that I talk about, we've got this documented as a process, the whole customer journey, and we've actually got it written down in a diagram form as a circular process. So it's not something that has a start and finish. There's different entry points depending on where people are on that particular customer journey. Of course, this logical start point is understanding ourselves and what we're bringing to the table and why we're doing it. And then next step, understanding the customer deeply. But as we go around that circle and really understand our business and start to optimize things as we learn more, then of course entry points, there are entry points for people coming into that journey at different places.
Yeah, for sure. And I can see how it can really help to almost like crystallize, exactly the purpose of the business and then having those mechanisms in place, having the processes in order to be able to delight those clients at each of those touch points, as you mentioned. So just finally then, so I know that you've got experience of developing systems and processes in relation to mapping the client journey. But what are some of the things that you see that people are afraid of doing or afraid to implement when it comes to creating processes and systems?
Well, I mean, we've talked quite a bit about ideal client or dream client, and I think one of the things that still people are resistant to is, but I'm going to miss out on some opportunities if I narrow down and focus. And I guess hopefully in our conversation today, we've highlighted that actually it opens up the opportunities for the right type of clients to come into your world and for you to serve the clients that aren't a good fit in a really good and ethical way by sending them elsewhere. The other thing in terms of process, and I still fall into this trap also, I was doing a little bit of work this morning and I thought, gee, I did that 2 weeks ago and I've forgotten how to do it again. And why didn't I write it down at the time or record it? So even every little thing that we do in our business, we should be documenting how that works, even if it's, and for me, there are things that I guess, that I would put them in a category of that's too trivial to put in our official documentation. And yet 2 weeks later, I've forgotten how to do that. And so the first time I did it, it took me an hour. Instead of now only taking half an hour or maybe even 10 minutes, it takes me another hour. In fact, sometimes it'll take me an hour and a half because I'll think half an hour, hang on, I must have something somewhere where I did that before. So I actually spend longer. So I think documenting everything is a big lesson for me as well.
Yeah, I think that we've found that obviously we do practice what we preach. We write our own processes, as you would expect, being in this business. But what we've actually found over the last 18 months or so is that sometimes it's quicker and easier to record a 3-minute video, like a show and tell video, to explain how to do something. Because it's really quick and easy to be able to capture rather than trying to write out a document. But secondly, I think some people learn in different ways, don't they? Some people like to read things. Some people prefer something that's a little bit more interactive. I prefer audio or to watch something. So we're now starting to bring in different elements of ways to be able to capture processes and ways of working here at our company too. But I think the main thing is, as you've highlighted, is just to capture what you do. A lot of people, as you said, think, oh, well, that's trivial, I don't need to do that. But then how many times a day do you get asked that question, because it might be somebody else that needs to do that particular task. And they might go off and do it in their own way and they make a bit of a mess of it, or it's not done to your company standards. So it's a great way to be able to define what your way of working is as an organisation too.
That's right. Yeah, I'm a big fan of videos and screen recordings too, and I think that's a great tip.
Yeah. Even, podcasts like this, people can go back and listen to them, make notes and hopefully apply what they've learned back into the workplace. I've certainly made some notes today that I'll be going back and bringing back to the team. So yeah, I just wanted to say thank you very much for that, Jürgen, for those hints and tips that you've shared with us today. Any final hints or tips that you'd like to leave us with?
I guess I'll just come back to what I said earlier about conversations. And it all starts with conversations. Even as we go through the dream customer exercises, having conversations with people you think might be dream customers, asking them questions, getting to know them at a deeper level. And even if it's a big organization, getting to know the key stakeholders and decision makers and understanding what drives them and what values they have. It all starts with conversations, and all the relationships that follow are really built on conversations. So I guess I just encourage people to have those conversations.
Brilliant. And if any of our listeners would like to engage in those conversations with you, what's the best way of them being able to reach out to you?
Well, they can go to my website, innovabiz.com.au, and they'll see a video of me there in the bottom corner, and it's actually a proper video. It's not a chatbot thingy, and you can respond to that video with either a video of your own or audio, or you can type in some text and that will start a conversation with me. Alternatively, if you go to my LinkedIn profile and send me a message there, tell me you heard me on the ISO show and I will respond to you there.
Fantastic. Well, thanks very much for being such a fascinating guest and sharing information, which I know our ISO show listeners will be able to apply in their own organisations. So yeah, thanks once again, Jürgen. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you, Mel. It was great to chat with you.
So thanks very much for listening to the ISO show today. If you enjoyed the episode and would like to find out a little bit more about the things that we talked about, more details will be found over in our show notes. And also, if you'd like to leave any comments, we'd love to hear from you as well. So thanks once again. I look forward to catching up with you on the next ISO show.
Looking to use ISO standards to drive better business practice? Contact us at blackmoresuk.com to access further information and book your free 15-minute call.